Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar with Sunshine Hydro. I'm Zoe, I'm a campaign manager here at Birchal, and just before I introduce Michael, Chris and Rick from Sunshine Hydro, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which Birchal is based on today, and that's the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. These webinars are a fantastic opportunity to learn so much more about the incredible businesses that are on the platform. And in today's session, the senior leaders are going to take us through a presentation, which will be approximately 15 to 20 minutes, all about Sunshine Hydro, where they've come from, what they're looking to do with the capital raise, and then we'll switch into a Q&A session. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a little Q&A bubble. So if you have any questions, please submit them through there today. And you're also able to upvote other questions that have come through, and that will help me with prioritizing what to ask today. If you need to jump off early, we are recording today's session, and I know that there's some major internet issues going on for people today. So please rest assured that you can watch this later and also get in touch with the founders and senior leaders from Sunshine Hydro through your Birchal account. Just really quickly, Birchal allows people to invest in early stage companies like never before. Investors purchase ordinary shares in Australian small businesses and startups and should consider their investment as medium to long term. As the CSF platform, we act as a gatekeeper to ensure that all these investment offers that we host are also compliant with ASIC laws. I've included some help articles just in the chat today for anyone who might be new to crowdsource funding. And I really encourage you to hop onto the Birchal website to just learn more about what kind of investment you could be making when you do invest in Sunshine Hydro through Birchal. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Michael, who's going to introduce the team and take it from here, I believe.
Hi, Zoe. Thank you and welcome to everyone. I also would like to do an acknowledgement of country. Rick, Chris and I are on the Mayo and Brisbane River, so I want to acknowledge the elders of the Turrbal and the Jagera people and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging. So welcome to you all. I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's the founder of Sunshine Hydro, and he's going to kick it off.
Thanks, Michael. And thanks, Zoe. So yeah, I'm Chris Baker, co-founder of Sunshine Hydro. I'm a infrastructure engineer and software developer, and those things are quite important for what we do. I'm not going to talk about much more about me just now because I want to talk about Rick and Michael. And Michael Meyer, his grandfather started Meyer department stores. So you kind of know who we're talking about here. And Michael is a serial entrepreneur. You know, he's done lots of different businesses. I'd also like to talk a little bit about Rick. And Rick is 25 years ago, Rick came back from the US. When he was there, he floated a company, and then on his return to Australia, he started angel investor groups and founders forum, and he's been involved in investing in startups and mentoring startups and generally being involved in lots of startup companies. Now, why I talk about this in this way, both Rick and Michael, you know, they could be sitting on the beach sipping martinis, but, you know, they're not that kind of person. They really want to be involved in things that motivates them, in work that they really love. And lots of people come to them wanting them to help them out in their business, to be a director or whatever. But they've chosen Sunshine Hydro. And I'm really humbled by this, that amongst all the things they could choose, they've chosen to come with Sunshine Hydro. And that reflects how important we think this is, what we're doing. And it's just lovely that they're doing that, and kind of underlines the value that they see in what we're doing. They put their time and money into this. And I can tell you they work really hard at this. And by the way, like myself, aren't taking any salary. So we get the maximum value from any any shareholder funds that come in, we eke out the maximum value that we can. I'm just about to hand over to Michael, but I'd like to say that Michael literally walks his talk. So as an example, when he was developing the Sunrise at 1770 Sustainable Development Project, Michael literally walked in front of the bulldozer to make sure the best trees were preserved. And that's how closely he gets involved in everything that he does. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thanks, Chris. It's very quite humbling. Look, I wanted to say, with regard to where I've come from and where we are today and why I'm doing this journey for me began 40 years ago. I had a mentor, a woman, who enlightened me about the threat of climate change. And this was before James Hansen testified in 1985. So I've been on a journey to help decarbonize the planet for over 40 years. And in between that time, I've done many things. I started the Brumby's bakery chain and took that public. It was the first second board float way back in the day. I was involved in the first Australian software float on NASDAQ in the early 90s. I was able to set up Queensland's first venture capital fund that grew into a portfolio of multi-billion dollars of companies. And then I've been involved, as Chris just mentioned, in sustainable development in the same area that we're working. I did a development, Chris said, Sunrise at 1770, that won the award for the best sustainable development in Australia and went on to win the award for the silver medal for the best in the world. So I've been in this space, and this has been sort of my mission. And I met Chris serendipitously about 5 years ago, and what he was doing quite blew me away. And I decided to join with Chris to try and help bring Sunshine Hydro forward with its mission. So, and then I met Rick, and Chris and I persuaded Rick to join. And like Chris said, he's been an angel investor for over 20 years. And what his two principles were, I'll never join the company and become an executive again. And he's changed completely because he believes that this is a company that is, really worthwhile devoting his time to. So I'll hand over to introduce Rick, who's the CEO.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, these two guys are amazing. I'm so lucky to be involved. So my journey, I'm a civil engineer as well. I've had quite a bit of experience in large-scale development, both in coal and grain terminals in Canada. We had a big project 40 kilometres south of the Alaska border in that area. I got involved in writing software, and I took a company public in the US. I ended up spending 4 years in Canada and 13 years in the US before coming back to Australia. And when I got back to Australia, I pretty much determined I was an investor, an early stage investor. And I set up a couple of groups, some of the Angels groups, and I know that Jordan Green, you're online, who's the founder of the Melbourne Angels group. And, I was one of the founding members of the Brisbane Angels and Gold Coast Angels. And, I've certainly been involved in that space. And when Chris approached me, Chris came over to the US while I was over there. He had a software package that was heavily involved in terrain modeling, and that terrain modeling is really some of the essence of what we do within this organization. Finding sites is very important, and Chris's knowledge on that front is second to none. He's a very stubborn programmer who doesn't take no for an answer. He keeps going until he solves the problem. And that was one of the ticks that I already had before I was engaged by these guys. That tick and the tick of integrity, not having to worry about checking out Chris's integrity because I knew him so well, made a massive difference. And, Michael's experience speaks for itself. And the three of us together have created a company that's pretty amazing, and certainly the best board of directors I've ever been on. And we're going to take this thing where it needs to go, and we're investors. We're looking for a decent return on it at some point, and certainly we're going to change the world as well. We are going to decarbonize the planet. We are going to have a big impact. So that's my story, and I'm really proud to know these guys and really happy to be involved. So thank you, Chris and Michael.
Oh dear.
Just going to get back to the first slide, Michael, and we'll be off the races.
I've got to go right back. Sorry. Right at the end. So, look, I want to take you through a few slides, and they say a picture tells 1,000 words, and we're going to take you through about half a dozen, which probably tell you tens of thousands. So this first slide acknowledges a couple of key things. Sunshine Hydro belongs to this United Nations Compact for 24/7 carbon-free energy, which goes to the heart of our business model, which we'll explain as we go forward. Another key thing is we are formally partnering with our traditional owner partners, and we see them as a key part of the solution that we're bringing to the market. And then finally, you may have heard that we won the Sustainability Award. So what we're doing in the project that we're developing are all about creating sustainability in every aspect of what we do. The next slide, I want to talk to you. You may have seen on some of the information we sent out an email about what do we do. So what we're creating is what's called the super hybrid. It's a whole new model of how you see the ecosystem of renewable energy. You would have all heard a lot about the wind projects. You've heard about solar, utility scale projects. You've probably heard about pumped hydro because of Snowy 2 or the Kidston project in far north Queensland. What we've done with Sunshine Hydro and what Chris has done with his software is integrate these different aspects, bring all this ecosystem together, which is inclusive of wind, inclusive of solar, inclusive of pumped hydro, inclusive of electrolysis and liquefaction to create green hydrogen. But then as developers, there's a process, and I've been a property developer, and you identify sites, you secure land, you get approvals, you take it through the approval process, you bring it to commerciality, and you add value to the project. If it's a big project, you'll typically bring in partners. These are all the things we do in developing a super hybrid. That is the core of what we've been doing. But behind it all is the software, which Chris will show you later, that integrates and optimizes these different asset classes. And this is the first time, it's really worth emphasizing, this is the first time anywhere in the world that all these assets have been brought together to optimize the different moving parts. What I want to show you now is the site of our first project. What is going on? There we go. So the first project is up at Miriam Vale, just south of Gladstone. Some of you may know it's west of the Pacific Highway. The project's called Jandori Gungi, and which means spirit in the water. That name was given to us by our traditional owner partners in the project. And this is the actual site of the project. And I'll show you physically on the screen. The upper reservoir is going to sit up here. This is a photograph that Chris took from a plane back 5 years ago. The upper reservoir is going to be up here at the, up here. And the lower reservoir is going to sit down below. And the size of this project is quite a big project. It's 600 megawatts of pumped hydro, and it'll store 11 gigawatt hours, which is 18 hours of energy. And it'll have 300 megawatts of electrolysis and fuel cells. And what it'll draw on, the energy that it'll draw on from the catchment of renewable resources is 1.8 gigawatts. So you're talking a big project. This is, and then what'll come out of the project that we're developing is what we call carbon-free energy, and 300 megawatts. And carbon-free energy is energy, clean energy that's matched hour by hour. And this is becoming increasingly important in the market, and we'll talk about that later. And then also we'll be producing green hydrogen and or methanol. Oops. So I want to talk a bit about this, the software that Chris has developed, which we call ESOP. And we think of it as a conductor of these different parts of the ecosystem: the wind, the solar, the pumped hydro, the electrolysis, and the liquefaction. And the software that Chris has spent 6 years developing, when that project I just showed you a moment ago, when he first modeled that, we were getting about 50 megawatts of carbon-free energy. And today we're getting 300 megawatts because we've actually been running this project as a simulation, as a digital twin for the last 4 years. And what I'm going to get Chris to do is to actually show you this project as if it was running today, as if it was live and performing. And this, Chris, I'm going to stop sharing and get you maybe to share the project as if it was running today. You right to do that?
Sure, I'm happy to take that over. Just a moment while this comes up. So I want to mention there that it's more than just me. There's Tim Cummings, there's Sasith who's on the call. This is a result of a big effort by more than just me. And I perhaps started the idea with it in the beginning. What I'd like to show you here is what the data is we're looking at here. This is connected. This is taking in live data and from the electricity grid. So what we see here is 67 megawatts of wind energy coming in and 314 megawatts of solar at the moment. And it's drawn coming into here. What this represents really is ESOP, the software and its decision making, and it directs the energy to the best place for the energy to go at the time. And what you see here is that 300 megawatts that we talked about earlier, that Michael spoke about, the carbon-free energy, 24/7 carbon-free energy, going to some kind of off-taker. Now, maybe this is a cloud server farm, data farm, and or aluminium smelter, or some industrial process that needs to rely on energy 24 hours a day, and that it needs to be in the world that we're coming into. We need to show that it's balanced hour by hour and always coming from a renewable energy resource. So at other times it can come from the hydro, which is this symbol here. The rest of the energy is being used here. 34 megawatts is going to the electrolyzer and 47 megawatts going towards liquefaction. It's, I think, important to point out that one of the values of the electrolyzer is that it can operate at just very quickly change its operating level and be what we need it to be. So it can take up like the balance. It's kind of like the balancing thing that can put the right load that we need on the network at the time to make the best use of the energy that's coming in. Now I'd like to switch to the chart, which shows us what this project has been doing. This just shows over the last 7 days the storage of energy that was in the upper dam and how it changes from time to time. Not much happening it's been an easy week for it. What I'd like to show you is this image here, which gives you probably, I think, a better picture, because it shows the obvious thing is this line going straight through here, which is that 300 megawatts. And what we're looking at here is the last 7 days of its operation. And you can see that we've got that continuous production of that energy. It's like a nuclear power station or a coal-fired power station, or it always produces this. And if we were to look at this chart going back over 4 years, it's able to deliver that energy with actually greater than 99% reliability in terms of the energy availability. The squiggly lines here show the wind and solar. So you can see sometimes it's gone down to a low level, and the hydro would have picked up on that. And these other green lines up here are the hydrogen production. And you can see it's quite jagged, where the hydrogen is adjusting to match whatever loads, whatever wind production and solar production there is at the time. Now I'd like to switch to show you the commercial situation. So what this is showing here is the gross trading profit that this project would have done if it was running in the market live, as we're simulating here. So this $18 million is what it would have earned in gross profit over the last 30 days. Now, to give you a yardstick, GE Hydro did a study of a similar sized pumped hydro project and estimated what it would return if it was operating in the Queensland energy market, which is this. This is where this is working. And it showed $27 million profit for the year. And so you can see here we've got $18 million gross profit for 30 days. So this gives you a feeling for how much better this system operates if it's operating as an ecosystem. And it also includes the hydrogen production. That's part of it as well. So let me switch back to Michael. Are you able to, if I stop sharing,
Yeah,
Michael?
I can just go back to the PowerPoint. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Can you see that slide?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry, I got to do it in the screen share. Oh dear.
So while Michael brings that up, just talk about that measure. It seems quite a bit bigger of a number, and that's because we've got this contracted revenue stream that can be relied upon, and that's quite important to make a project attractive to investors, that the debt holders would know that they have a long-term contracted revenue to underwrite their investment. Traditional pumped hydro relies on daily arbitrage, and because that's exposed to the market, both buying the energy and selling it, there's uncertainty about that. And so as well as being actually a bigger number of gross trading profit, it also has this reliability component. So back to you, Michael.
Can you see the slide now?
Yeah.
So this is a slide that intro to Chris showing the project as if it was actually running. And what he described as the performance of the project talks to this big question, which is, oh dear, come on. How we create value for shareholders, and this sort of goes to our sort of business model. And what we're actually doing, we've described this first project, Jandori. We actually have a portfolio of projects that we're working on, not only in Queensland, but also in New South Wales. And it's from developing that portfolio that we are creating value for our existing shareholders and future shareholders. The other thing we do is that we get management fees from those projects. So the Jandori project, we're literally in the process of negotiating with a major investor to come in, and we'll continue to manage the project day to day through to what's called FID. So we have revenue coming out of management fees. And then intention is, because these are such big projects, is to sell down stakes in these projects. So we'll move where we'll probably end up with a minority stake, and then we'll move the capital that's released out of the projects into another project, going back to the portfolio of projects. So it's like being a developer, developing a portfolio of projects and releasing value from those projects. And then finally, what we do, the software that Chris has created, we license in to every project. So there is a license agreement in place for the Jandori project. There's a licensing agreement in place for our generic New South Wales project. And we'll earn recurring revenue on these projects going forward because it's unique. It adds enormous value, as Chris just described, in terms of the gross profit. So these are the 4 key drivers behind our business model, which will be explained more in the offering document. In terms of creating value, I guess one of the key factors is that there's a case of been there, done that. Rick's successfully floated software companies on NASDAQ in the US. I've been involved in floating a beta consumer in terms of the Brumbies bakery chain. Was involved in the first float of a software company on NASDAQ back in the early 90s. And I've sat on the board of Australia's largest private investment company for decades. The products that we're generating, this carbon-free energy, this green hydrogen, is a really growing market. For example, Chris mentioned, a data center. We're talking to one prospect who's wanting to build a new data center here in Brisbane, and that one data center will need 300 megawatts of carbon-free energy 24 hours a day. So the market for green, whether it's clean fuels, is growing quite dramatically, and we're really well placed to capitalize on that future. And I guess behind it is that the values that we share together as a team is that our aim is to help decarbonize. These projects have a significant impact on decarbonizing the economy, and we're able to address the needs of the future-facing economy. So look, that's over from me, Chloe. I think I'll hand it back to you now. If you'd like to moderate for us any questions that you may well have come through.
Thank you, and thanks for such a great presentation. We do have some cute questions coming through. Oh, now I'm having trouble with my screen. 1 second.
I'm happy to pick up that one from Jordan if you like, Zoe, while you get your screen up. Would that be okay?
No, it's okay. I'm here now. Thank you, though. Yeah, so I don't know. Jordan seems to know Rick by the looks of it. But Jordan has asked, once energy markets stop paying at peak price of the most expensive generator, will you be able to maintain your pricing and margins?
Yeah, good. Jordan, and one of the things we've done to address that is the different lines of revenue that we talked about. So the 24/7 carbon-free energy, that line of revenue is something that we would be able to contract in the long term, and so then it's not exposed to the changes in the market price. And look, it's roughly about a third for these different things. That's a third for carbon-free energy. It's about 1/3 for the hydrogen part of the business, and about 1/3 for the market-facing part. Selling energy into the market, which is what you're talking about, and is subject to the prices there. And the interesting thing about this model, depending on who the ultimate owner of the project turns out to be, we can change the risk profile. So that part of the energy that you're talking about, Jordan, is the part that's perhaps got the highest risk, but also may have the greatest reward, as we've seen in 2022 when the prices went really high. But for the owner, we can tune the project, to make more carbon-free energy and more hydrogen and less market exposure, or for an owner who is more interested in the upside of the potential, higher prices that might come one day if they've got a bigger appetite for risk. You can tune it so that more energy is available for that market. So I hope that's answered your question.
You see the pie chart? Is that on the screen now?
Oh yeah, the pie chart. The pie chart.
Can I talk to that, Chris? So just further to the question, the difference between our model and a business as usual pumped hydro. So conventional pumped hydro like Wivenhoe, Snowy One, virtually any pumped hydro in the world, it generates revenue in this top right-hand corner of the pie chart. It basically pumps when the prices are low. It's an arbitrage model. It generates when prices are high. What Chris set out to do in what your software was to create this long-term contractable revenue, which is all the left side of the pie chart. So all this carbon-free energy, we can contract long. So we're looking to contract 15-year contracts for carbon-free energy. So it creates a really stable recurring revenue stream. We also produce a sustainable supply of green or liquefied hydrogen, which is also contractable long. So that's over 50% of the revenue mix can be contracted and is stable, predictable revenue. Then we also, not only we do the conventional business as usual, the electrolyzer can behave just like an arbitrage model as well. So when the prices are high, it can turn off. So the energy that it was using automatically can be made available to the market. So that generates another bit of the pie. And then because the catchment that we're drawing the energy from is quite large, we actually have additional revenue that we can trade into the market. The difference being that we actually control when that energy goes to the market. So we end up with this, basically, like Chris showed you when it was operating, that the GE model for a project here in Queensland was generating about 24 million gross profit, whereas we're generating about 240 million gross profit from a similar size project. It's quite dramatically different. So back to you, Chloe.
Thank you. John has just said that he loves the vision and that you want to change the world, Rick. Thanks, John. Daniel has asked, why have you chosen a mega project for the first project? Is it a maximum exposure, or does it fit in with the risk matrix?
So we actually have a smaller project. We're working very closely with Central Queensland University to put a smaller project together to test and work and develop training programs for everything from grid engineers to operators for the projects. So we are actually taking a small step. That small step will be up and running within 2 years, whereas the bigger projects do take a lot longer to get off the ground.
You. Also, just for everyone's awareness, I have shared the Sunshine Hydro email address if you wish to keep having discussions after this session with one of the members of the team. I can take these next two questions from Michael. Michael has asked, what is the valuation of the company, and also how much are you raising? Michael, we are running an expression of interest campaign right now on Birchal. So that means we're gathering data around the interest that investors have in investing in Sunshine Hydro. So we're still finalizing the numbers, and we're looking at EOI data to inform how much will be raised. And yeah, there's a document called the offer document that will be available that Michael referred to earlier in the session. And that includes a lot of information about the business, the valuation of the company, terms of the offer, the company's financials for the last 12 months, as well as a lot more information. So while we can't share the valuation or the terms of the offer right now, I really encourage you to make sure you've made an expression of interest through Birchal, so that you're able to be kept up to date, and then you're one of the first people that can find out this information when the offer is set to launch next week. And we also have a lot of help articles online, which I mentioned as well. Stephen has asked, which company will be holding the shares?
So there's only one company, Sunshine Hydro Proprietary Limited. We do have subsidiary companies that will own each of the projects individually. At the moment, we own 100% of all of those, but we will bring partners in for those projects. So the main company is Sunshine Hydro Proprietary Limited, and that will be the shares that are issued, and they'll be ordinary shares on par with everybody else's shares.
Cool, thank you. And also Stephen said, love what you're doing. Stephen has also asked, is there any other company in the world doing what you're doing?
Well, that's a good question, and we can't find anybody at all. I spent the last week at the International Hydro Association Congress in Indonesia and met with a lot of the senior players over there. All of those players are quite amazed at what we're doing, and I don't think there's anybody doing anything near what we are doing. So we are alone. We're quite surprised that's the case. We actually think we should have competitors, and one day we may, but at the moment we can't find any. And the lead on it, Chris has been developing this software over a period of 8 years. So for somebody to come into the market and try and compete would be quite difficult. So I think our lead is really quite substantiated, and the global market now knows who we are. So they're beginning to talk about us, and I think we're in a pretty strong position.
Just to amplify that point, Zoe, there's 3 big pumped hydro turbine companies in the world. There's GE is one, Andritz from Switzerland is another, and Voigt from Germany, isn't it, Chris, is the 3rd big one. We've been working very closely in strategic terms with Andritz, who are doing the turbines for the Kidson project at the moment. We see them as a strategic partner. Their senior management, I think, was in Bali with you, Rick.
Yeah, they were.
And the CEO, through their eyes. In fact, I think Rick put a little clip up on the Birchal activity page with Rick interviewing the CEO of Andritz. And he was, as someone from his seat, and they've got projects on every continent in the world. By his own admission, he said, there isn't anyone doing this super hybrid model, and they're really interested because they've branched out from pump hydro into electrolysis and the technology to produce green hydrogen. So it gives you an idea of where the major global players are looking.
Thanks. And I guess that's a good lead into the next question from John, which is probably good for Chris to answer. Is, can you sell the software to others, and how do you stop others from copying it? So, if you have no competitors, how do you defend your IP currently? And yes, can you sell the software to others?
Sure. Look, whilst we're primarily having the software for our own projects, we're certainly open to selling it to existing pumped hydro projects who want to change the way they operate, and other project developers who are looking at pumped hydro projects. So, we're really looking to how do we help decarbonisation, and if we can help it by selling our software to other participants, we're really open to that. And how do we protect the software by a normal, the standard copyright provisions are there. But one of the things we're looking at doing is by developing our own projects, which is the example that we looked at there, Jandori, we would implement the software in projects, and the smaller one that Rick talked about. And you might have seen in one of the slides, there's quite a few other projects that we're looking at identifying sites so that we can use the software on projects. But ultimately, there will be some competitors somewhere along the line, but who knows when and how that might happen.
And I know you have your super hybrid trademark, but are you able to register the IP for any of this project, or for the company? Have you done that?
The IP is protected by copyright, so there's that standard kind of copyright law as of right. We haven't looked at patenting any of them.
Can I answer?
Yes.
Can I answer that as well, Chris? I've worked with a lot of young companies where IP is very important, and it does make a difference if you can patent. It makes a difference to the investors. It doesn't necessarily make a difference because often they can't defend it anyway, and it kind of becomes a bit of a waste of time. And in this case, there are a couple of areas where we could patent it, and we've decided not to. We've decided to keep them basically as trade secrets because there's no reason for those trade secrets to get out. And given the time, the 8 years that Chris has put into this, it is an evolutionary product. It's not something that can be just developed quickly and hastily. So we've got a big enough window to safeguard ourselves from that standpoint. And I think the approach of eating our own dog food, as Michael likes to say, and getting our own projects up and running, there's an enormous amount of profit that we can draw from those projects that will make our investors happy. And if we're successful in getting the product into the market from a sales standpoint, then that just adds to the pie. But I think we're in a pretty safe position to be able to generate revenue in the future.
Just one final point on that, sorry, and this is really, really important, is that ESOP it's learning. It's very clever. It's making millions of, Chris showed it operating every 5 minutes. It's actually making millions of decisions. It's looking ahead and saying, what's the wind going to be doing in the next week? You know, how much airspace is in the reservoir? How much water is in the reservoir? What's the market price? It's making, and it's been learning. So when I first met Chris, he was looking at exactly this. He showed me the software. And as I said earlier, at that time, it was producing 50 megawatts of carbon-free energy. And I was blown away by that. Chris, that's amazing. And here we are today, what, 4 years later, Chris? It's now producing 300 megawatts. And he and I had a conversation yesterday. We think we might be able to get it to 350 megawatts. So it's this software, not only does it work as a digital twin, and not only will it operate, it's very smart. It's a bit like your Google algorithm, or it's a bit like it starts to know you and it starts to send you ads and it's a learning tool. It's learning all the time. And that is constantly giving us more and more of an edge and advantage on every project.
Oh, thank you. This one's from Michael too. Why have you chosen crowdfunding, and you know, why have you not chosen other funding models? I think you touched on it before about how you have other investors. But tell us why you've chosen crowdfunding, and have you exhausted all your other funding options?
Well, let me answer that, Zoe. We like the idea of increasing our shareholder register because, you know, there is a potential for us to list in the future, and it's kind of a mandate that you grow your shareholder list to be able to cater for that. This is a short-term raise in order to just buy a little bit of time and extend our runway, so we're in a safer position to negotiate these big contracts that we've already started negotiating. And we don't want to be in a position if these big companies are willing to drag us out into a 6-month or a 9-month window of before we can close them. We need to be safe in doing that. So it kind of gives us this amount of money gives us an ability to lengthen the runway and to have the luxury of being able to negotiate with that strength, knowing that we're financially stable. So that's the reason for the fund.
One other reason, Rick, is we really see this as an opportunity to have the community join in something that's quite unique and innovative. I mean, as an ordinary investor, you'd never get an exposure to something like this. You know, like when I first met Chris and I put some of my own money in it, as Rick has, you would never normally have a chance to be exposed to a B2B type business like this. You know, it's quite, so we also want the community to have a chance to come along with us on that journey. It is a journey, and Chris started it 6 to 7 years ago, right? And we really wanted to give smaller investors who, you know, up until now, we've done how many rounds, Chris? Four funding rounds, right? And, you know, the last funding round, we had a minimum investment of 100,000. Not everyone, as you'd know, Zoe, has 100,000 to invest. So this is a chance using Birchal, which I've invested with previously, you know, in other deals that Birchal's done. It gives a smaller investor a chance to come along with us.
Thank you. Sorry, we got a lot of questions building up, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just trying to pull out a few different ones to throw to you. David has asked, Gen X is doing solar wind and is currently constructing the pumped hydro in far north Queensland. Are they perhaps close to your model?
Can I take that? I think the Gen X project is a lovely example to look at, to use as a yardstick for this project. So it's a bit different the way they're approaching it in their operational model. but technically the project is quite similar. So what I like to draw the comparison about is because there's a thing, the main access tunnel, it's one of the important things, how you drive down under the ground into the cavern of the power station. The GenX, the length of that at GenX is the same as the Jandori project. And so you can think if the project construction that they've done at GenX was being done in our project, it's kind of the same task and the same project that's ahead of us. And it's more or less on time and on budget. And, we're talking to those people that are building that. And with big infrastructure projects, one of the things that you can do to make them safer is to build multiple projects, of the same, have multiple copies of the same project. And this is a bit like the GenX project. If we have the learnings from the GenX project and bring it to the Jandori project, there can be big advantages in de-risking the project. So there's that. The operating model is quite different in that they've contracted with a large off-taker to just hire the power station and use that to run as they wish. Whereas we propose these various revenue streams which we've set out. So it's probably complicated to dive into too much detail. I hope that's answered enough of your question.
Well, can I just add to that one bit, and that is, if you were to look at Kidston as a super hybrid, you would have to add a couple of pieces to it. One being the software, obviously, but also you have to add the electrolyzer. So there'd be a significant cost of a few $100 million to put that in place. But the revenue generation would go up very significantly. So if we end up selling the software in the future, GenX would be a perfect potential customer that we would approach and work with. So they're probably a customer in the future, and we expect that's what's going to happen in the future. Is that as people begin to understand the proposition we put forward, they're going to see it as a best practice in business. Chris hates me using those words, by the way, but it is something that everybody's going to be looking at, and they will migrate towards that model or some model very similar to it. So I think it is a potential customer for us in the future.
There was one other difference you alluded to in your question, which was GenX has some wind and solar there. And maybe it might have been a little bit misleading. So when we talk about the ecosystem, and certainly for Jandori, we'd be drawing wind from throughout Queensland. It's not all behind the meter. In fact, very little would be behind the meter. So the data Chris was showing was from wind farms from far north Queensland down to the Darling Downs. So we'll be drawing our wind and solar resources from a very diverse geographic spread, and maybe a little bit behind the meter, but not much. It doesn't have to be co-located.
Thanks.
By the way, can I just add one other point? The GenX project is designed to have about 6 to 8 hours of operating time at full power, and the Jandori project is 18 hours. So in our modelling, what we found is that we need much longer ability to generate to make sure that it gets through days of low wind and solar. So there is a physical difference between the length of storage that's in those two projects.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe.
Everyone, we have your names and email addresses because you registered for this session. So if we can't get through all the questions today, the team will try and endeavour to get in touch with you again, or maybe hold another session so that we can get through more of these questions.
Yeah, just on that, Zoe, yes, we are going to hold another session. So if you have registered, which you have with Birchal and Zoe, we are planning to have one which we'll organise, because we suspected, Zoe, that there'd be more questions than we could get to. And we really would like to, because it's new, it's different, and a lot of people would have gone, I haven't heard about this before. So I think it's a good idea for us to have another one. We're thinking to have one, and we'll notify people.
Cool. So the best way to be notified is to make an expression of interest.
Yeah.
We'll keep just trying to power through some questions. I can take this one, which is from Rowan. Rowan's asking, how much equity are you selling in this round? And is there a chance of future capital raises? I would say on behalf of the company, there's always a chance of future capital raises. At the moment, Rowan, the equity that the company is giving away will be available when the offer document is available. So it's really important that you review the offer document. And they'll tell you what kind of equity is being given away in this round. It'll also cover the offer document that I'm talking about will also cover off what the use of funds will be with the money raised. Ashish has asked, where do we sell green hydrogen and which industries use this for what purpose?
Chris, do you want to?
Okay, there's we are in discussions with some potential off-takers for two possibilities, green hydrogen and for green methanol. So we think green methanol is one of the likely uses of hydrogen because there's already a demand for it. The Maersk shipping company has already launched a ship. Just in the past few months, they've named it, and it's had its maiden voyage, a ship that runs on methanol. They've ordered 26 of those, and other shipping companies around the world have ordered over 100. So there will be a strong demand for green methanol. So we can make methanol out of hydrogen, and the other thing is to sell hydrogen directly. And some of our trading neighbours, Korea and Japan, are planning to use hydrogen in their decarbonisation strategy, and so they are potential off-takers. And as well, there is possibly a market in Australia. It's undeveloped, so we see the easiest path, the most obvious, clear path forward is to make methanol, because there's already that demand and can easily be used for other purposes as well.
Thank you. Rick, you want to answer the next question from Helen?
So I want to prompt this question because I think it's a very important one, and it's on social license, but I'd like Michael to actually answer it. And the question is, social license is critical to these projects, is actually becoming a reality. Can you talk more about what you are doing in the Indigenous and community engagement? So Michael, I know this is close to your heart. You know, I'm sure you can talk to this one.
Yeah, it's fundamental. In any project, the very first people you talk to, we've talked to, is the traditional owners of the country on which we operate. It's been a part of my MO for a long time. When I did the Sunrise development, I actually had them, I actually gave them a piece of the land that I bought, and basically partnered with them over 10 years as we did it. Now, happily, serendipitously, we're in the same country with the same mob that we're working with, and we've both formed a long-term partnership with a group called Birchal. And then we're actually, in this current week, we're actually sort of pioneering the model of offering equity to the traditional owners in the project as a whole. So we will be announcing that. Hopefully, we'll be signing that arrangement this week. They've been setting up their structure. So I'm a big believer that when we're building these renewable projects on country, this is their country, and it's a way of recognising the importance of the Indigenous owners of the country. And we're going to do that through actual equity participation. So not just treating them as, oh, we'll give you a royalty, or we'll do cultural heritage, or we'll offer jobs. And all of that we'll do too. And then as far as the community is concerned, we've engaged with the local community. We have a really good relationship with the landowners who are really lit up by what we do. And happily, again, the land that we've secured for the first project is about 8,000 acres. And of that, we'll use in the order of 500 acres as the footprint. So there'll be 7,500 acres that we'll be protecting. And in improving the biodiversity. So again, I go back to my own example. When I did the Sunrise project, I gave 75% of the land to bush heritage, and it became the first privately donated conservation reserve. And that reserve is, the biodiversity values have improved dramatically. And one of the things that I'm happiest about was I closed the 4-wheel driving on the beaches, which enabled the turtles to come back and nest. So over the last 25 years since I bought it from BHP, we have over 100 turtles nest on the beach. So I've worked it out when there's about 300,000 little turtles have born and will come back onto those beaches. So it's a fundamental part of our DNA is to put benefit back to the community and to recognise the traditional owners. So thank you for asking the question. It's right at the heart of what we do.
Hey, can I just give a quick shout out to Ash and Tony Martins, who are on the call, and they're the folks that Michael was just talking about, that we're looking to sign an agreement with them to be equity holders in the project. So hey, Ash and Tony, I know you can't respond, but they're there with us today.
And the serendipity goes further, Zoe. As you know, we won the award for the 2024, the Telstra Award for the best sustainable business. Tony and Ash's business, AWT, won the award for the best Indigenous business in Queensland for next year. So,
congratulations.
We didn't plan it that way.
I'll just get through a few more questions before we might have to wrap it up today. Audrey has asked, how will you obtain a skilled workforce? Is there any interaction with the transitioning workforce from Gladstone?
Look, I think it's very important for everybody to recognise what's happening in the overall community. And we've had COVID, and we've had people working from home, and then they've come back to work. We've had this enormous growth of the renewables market, so that we've seen a pretty major increase in costs on projects, something of the order of 30%, which has put a lot of pressure on projects. But those projects are still happening, and the demand on the workforce is quite huge. Our projects are big. This is a very significant project for the Gladstone region, and it will have a draw on the local community, and the local community will get the preference, for those jobs. Central Queensland University, part of the reason we're teaming up with them is not just to build this project, but also to get them up to speed on training people. There's a big change in the way the grid operates with renewables. It's a lot more intermittent. It's a lot more difficult to work with. And the grid engineers have to be a different breed of grid engineers. We're going to have to see that evolve, and the universities can help us do that. And Central Queensland University will be one of the first that's exposed to what we do. So they will be, taking people out of the Gladstone community and putting into work, and I'm sure those engineers, those first ones, will be in demand, and they may be leaving the Gladstone community and teaching in other universities. Who knows? But it's a big area of growth, and Gladstone's going to benefit from it.
Thank you. Michael has asked, what is the total value of all the assets minus liabilities? It might be a bit of a heavy question for the stage that we're at, but are you able to give any illusion, or do you just want to wait and let Michael see what will be included in the offer document?
Yeah, look, I think we can't talk about that based on the rules you've given us, Zoe. So it's in the offer document, and we're certainly going to be sharing that shortly.
So yeah, as mentioned before, there's a full set of financials included in the offer document for the past 12 months. So we can leave it at that. And yeah, the information will be available. Just so everyone's also aware, when the offer does open next week, there'll be a discussion board as well that you can participate in. So if you have any further questions after reviewing the offer document, you're welcome to post your questions in there, and the team will respond to you accordingly. Or otherwise, there's a button within your account on Birchal that says contact company or send message to company. So you're able to get in touch further if you wish to have more conversations and ask further questions. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what can be our final few questions for the day. How is the bidding strategy with AMO and NEM managed?
Chris.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that. So the software constructs a bid stack based on the information that it has, you know, the future weather conditions and the amount of water in the dams and how much hydrogen stored and what the price is and so forth. And at each 5-minute interval, we then measure that bid stack against the dispatch price that's in the market. And so we then see what we would have got dispatched if we used that bid stack. And so it's based on that. We also think that the project may affect the prices, you know, that are showing up on the spot market. And so we make an adjustment for that as well.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through some more questions. Are you able to give us a rough overview of timelines? When do shovels begin?
Chris?
I can answer that. Going to go back to what Rick said. We do have a small project Rick alluded to that we're developing with the university. And that would be where Rick said 2 years. I'd like to say, 30 months. We'd like to get that in place. It'll basically be a mini super hybrid because we'll be able to have everything operational. The timeline at the moment is to getting through the planning phase, and we're well into that planning phase with the council and the government. But you'll see in the offering document there's a sort of conceptual timeframe to reach what's called in the industry FID, by the end of 2026, and then hopefully start construction in 2027. So there's a process. It's not, we won't be turning the shovel tomorrow on site.
Okay, thank you. We've had quite a few repeat questions about who your competitors are, and particularly in Australia. So it might be good to cover that off in an email. Lastly, from David, I'll ask, and I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, the Wurundjeri, am I saying it correctly?
Yep, Wurundjeri, yep.
Yes, Wurundjeri. How will that project construction be funded?
Well, I'll answer that. As I mentioned in the slide deck, we're in discussions, and I can't say who, but we are in discussions with some of the largest pumped hydro companies in the world, renewable energy companies, because this is a big project, and we will be needing deep pockets, and we're literally in we're in sort of, if you like, what's called the due diligence phase. So it'll be funded by a mixture of private equity from major companies with big balance sheets, and also long-term green bonds or debt. So these projects could be a mixture of debt to equity, and the ratio will change. So it's Sunshine Hydro is the developer, so we get upside from developing the project, right? But we won't be going to the market to raise money to build the project. We will be bringing in partners who have very big balance sheets, and the sort of partners we're talking to are companies that have 100 billion plus of assets. You're talking big balance sheets. These are non-trivial projects. What we are is a very dynamic entrepreneurial team with the power of a very competitive advantage in the software that can bring these projects to the market.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll wrap it up for today. We'll try and we'll encourage the company to get in touch with you individually to answer some more of your questions. And also please stay tuned about when that next session might be held, because you might have the opportunity to ask your questions again. Thank you, Rick, Chris, and Michael, for such an insightful presentation today and for this afternoon's Q&A session. We still have a lot of questions unanswered, but it's great to see so much interest from the community out there. So thanks everyone for joining during what I assume is your lunch break. As mentioned earlier, a recording of this video will be sent around. So if anyone had to jump off for any reason, you'll be able to watch it again. And yeah, we have one more week with our expression of interest campaign. So if you are interested in investing or just want to learn more or be the first to know when the offer is going to open up, I encourage you to make an expression of interest through Birchal. It'll give you the opportunity just to learn more about the company, but also what kind of shares you're purchasing through crowdsourced funding and how that all works. And yeah, please stay up to date with communications, because we'll let you know also when the offer is going to go live, and that's when you'll be able to review this magnificent document we call the offer document, which will give you a lot more detail that I'm sure you're all after.
Look, thank you from our side. You're a fantastic moderator,
My pleasure.
chairperson. And thank you from us for everyone who's come.
Great.
And we will try and schedule another one. I can see there are a lot of, well, my chat Q&A said there's 24 unanswered questions, so we'll try and put answers together for those for people.
Lovely.
Thanks, everybody. Much
Thanks, Paul.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.